Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Okay, so it can't cope with landscape. It's got to be portrait. Sorry for my terrible camera work. So I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in Eton, going to give you a tour of the place. God, I really got to get using that microphone. Anyway, so behind me are the memorial buildings, so-called, the stone buildings, school library, and school hall beside it. So they're memorial to all the, school hall's the other way, to all the old Etonians who were killed in the Second South African War, 1899 to 1902. We now call it the Boer War, fight against the Transvaal Republic and the Orange State. I shan't go into the particulars of that. And above the door, well, I don't think I can see it from this angle, might show you more detail later, saying Amor Vincit Omnia, as in love conquers all, but in this case, a patriotic love is what they're talking about. As for school library, I don't think that needs any explanation. I went there almost every day for my 5 years, because I'm a bibliomane and a biblioclept, but that's another story. And then school hall, there are assemblies here regularly. So almost every morning you have to go to either chapel or to an assembly. So it's a Church of England school. Religion's quite a daily thing in people's lives, although most people are not religious. Might be nominal Christians. Obviously there have been Jews, Muslims, Hindus been allowed here since the 1880s. There's Mass, as in the Catholic ceremony, every Sunday morning in upper school. We meet in an upper room. Makes it sound like the 12 disciples. And there are classes for Jewish boys. There's been a Muslim chaplain stroke teacher for years now. So this lamppost behind me, where is it? Yeah, that's the burning bush, as in the Bible. What else about the burning bush? So a well-known meeting place, but that was in the middle of the road before the memorial buildings came along. Okay, behind me is Cannon Yard, and we'll see the cannon in a minute. The cannon, I'll have to move a bit. Taken from the Ruskies at the Battle of Sebastopol. That's the Crimean War, 1853 to 56. And these classrooms behind, that's where mathematics and geography is taught, economics, things like that. There's Cannon Yard. The gate is open. Well, this chap, who I suspect doesn't have any connection to the school, is doing it, so I'm going to brave it. Trespass is this much. And then, I've never actually bothered to read those inscriptions in the stone up there. No, I'm not. I am.
Did you know it's called Lambert?
No, I didn't. Seriously, I'm a bit busy.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is where there's a maths library, and this bit where the CCF was based. Yeah, up there. CCF is in combined cadet forces in Army, Royal Navy, and Royal Air Force. But there's been no Royal Navy section since the 80s, because occasionally these weekend exercises, go away to the countryside camping, playing your war games, and one time the Royal Navy had to be prisoners and be rescued by their side, who didn't manage to rescue them, so they were POWs for the whole weekend. Not a lot of fun. So joining the CCF is completely optional. Not even a quarter of boys join it. There was a time when it's compulsory. That is the CCF. We're not a very militarised society, thankfully. I joined it moronically because I made the wrong decision every single time as an adolescent and well into my 20s. Such is life. You live and learn. So these are some of the big houses, and this one was a certain Angus Graham Campbell, who was housemaster there. And God, when was he born? He was born about 1950, so I think he's retired. I bumped into him in Waterloo a few years ago. He didn't know me for Adam, but he knew me from Adam. He wasn't terribly fond of me. I shan't say why, but he was as nice as pie because he had no idea who I was. So, old boy is possibly losing his marbles. So there's a private side as where the housemaster lives, and then this is the hop garden. The hop gardeners, and they grew hops so they could grow beer there because the river water was too foul to drink. And so to keep the plague away, they had to smoke tobacco, had to drink small beer, as in very low alcohol content, well into the 18th century. So everybody was mildly inebriated permanently. They learned far better in a crapulous state. And so every morning before chapel, they would say, have you been smoking and drinking? And if you hadn't, you'd be beaten. You had to smoke tobacco to keep away bubonic plague. That was a theory. I suppose rats genuinely don't like it, nor do fleas, so there might be some method to the madness. And as for you couldn't drink water because you died, so beer was safer. You distilled it. Then we've gone into drinking tea, boiling water, and that was safe as well. So every house has got the private side where you've got a housemaster and his wife and children live. if he has them. And then the boys' side, well, the boys live, but obviously connected. Although there was a woman, Dr. Sillery, who was master in college, as in she's in charge of the King's Scholars for some years. His name is Peter Benson was, as in the bloke who wrote A Land of Hope and Glory. He didn't compose the music. I think Elgar did that, but he wrote the words. It's for the coronation of Edward VII. I shan't recall it all for you now. So this is what Eton is like. So some of it is very historic, quite handsome. One of those back there was Prince William's house, coming on to Holland House. I think, not the country. So some of these are named after 18th century politicians like, well, Lord Holland as the father of Charles James Fox. Godolphin was another one. But some of them are more modern and actually quite grim. So this is where it's getting quite plain. And I remember being here probably about my third day. This is called Judy's Passage. Walking down Judy's Passage, being quite dispirited and saying, God, this place looks grim. I don't like it one bit. Over the wall, that's the garden of one of the houses. It's the housemaster's garden. So they're very well accommodated. Having a large and commodious house in this part of the Thames Valley is a rare boon. So one of the key attractions of the job. So as you can see, part of these houses, they really don't look beautiful. Tradesman's entrance, and not in a root sense. And I remember laundry had to be delivered, and there was a van which was just thin enough to fit down this passage. Quite thin, hey? Maybe you get some idea of the dimensions of the place. So, yeah, it's not all beautiful, and it's not all historic, certainly. Well, what can I say? I'm surprised questions aren't flashing up about Eton. You might have wondered what it's like. I remember overhearing some tourists saying it's an oldie worldy sort of place, which it is, of course, and it wasn't always luxurious. It was getting better. It was renovated a lot when I was here. So everybody has his own room right from day one, which is quite unusual. Most schools, you have to be in a dormitory. Now, there are pluses and minuses in that. On the upside, you have a bit of privacy. It's easier to study. On the downside, you don't get to know people so well. But, you could be in a dormitory with some absolute merkin. And that's obviously a pain in the neck if you get in that situation, and the law of averages is going to happen sometimes. So it wasn't always that way. Like in college, if you go back a long time ago, there was a long chamber, a long dormitory for the younger boys, the younger King's Scholars, and there's still long chamber as in wall, as in for the Eton wall game. Anyway, and the King's Scholars for centuries were just locked in at night with no adult superintendence whatsoever. So there could be the most horrific bullying and nothing could be done about it. But, bullying was very much part of the course, just accepted in centuries ago. About 250 people a year at Eton. What are other notable things about it in those days? Thank God there was never a fire. They might not have been allowed out at night. And they were fed very meagre rations. They're malnourished much of the time, and they managed to steal a sow. They're going to slaughter her and eat her, but then they discovered she was pregnant and let the piglets come out. If you read these ancient stories of Eton, well, not ancient, goes back to 1440, but back to the Middle Ages. Look at this Farrer house. Now, this has got to win the prize for one of the most hideous buildings in Eton. So this is a 1960s one, as they always say, built by a prison architect. And there's one behind it built in a similar style. But, it's maybe more functional. So even if your dad is a housemaster, you have to be a boarder here. So anyway, they're very extensive gardens for the housemasters, like over this one. So, not everybody goes on to Oxford or Cambridge from here, maybe only 20%. Any notables in your year? God. Well, there was Simon Woods, he's a well-known actor. What's the catering like? It's fairly good. So a lot of people go to Beckington, which is like a big place with sort of a cafeteria style dining system, self-service. And then about half the house have their own kitchen, their own dining room. But in Beckington, you end up eating a special house section of it. So there are little kitchens in the houses where people can make themselves afternoon tea around about 4 o'clock. We also have a break at like 11, there's a mid-morning break where there's a snack in your house as well. I don't think we were allowed fridges in our houses in those days. People were often ordering takeaway pizzas. So look, this is another house, Warr House, as in W-A-R-R, after Edmund Warr, who was a headmaster at the school a very long time ago. So you're getting an idea of the dimensions of the place, and this is the sort of place I used to walk almost every single day. I'm from Cork, if someone asks. So, yeah, the food is kind of stodgy fare, things that boys will actually eat, and people don't eat with perfect table manners. There's this idea that people are very refined and effete and so on, and I suppose people can go, some people are like that, and some people who've been here maybe play up to it or something, but really, when all is said and done, the boys here, they are just teenage boys. despite quite a la-di-da background. Some of them are quite Philistine, quite uncultured. I was in JMSW, that was my house. It's like one of the Mitford sisters says, in England, education has no effect whatsoever. Well, yours truly would be an example of that, even though I'm from Ireland. So this is the Allington School. It's not really a school, as in a school building, a department. As in that's the English department, named after Cyril Allington, who was headmaster in the 1930s, if I got that right. So you've got an idea of what it's like. And there's an observatory up there, there's an outdoor swimming pool up there, places like that. But when Chris Eubank came to speak, about 1994, one of the boys in my years, he was asking where the Farrar Theatre was, and the boy deliberately gave him the wrong directions. Ha ha! I went to that talk by what's his name? Chris Eubank. He had a mobile phone, that was a rarity in those days. So I shan't go beyond this barrier. So you see what it's like. They're ordinary classrooms, they're reasonably well equipped, probably better equipped than I was, maybe smartboards now, quite spaced out. So, and then there's the Acacia schools, not Katia as in hunting, but he was provost or vice provost, I don't remember, because the provost is the living board of governors, chairman of the board of governors, not provost as in mayor like in Scotland, as in provost. We always quipped the provost does nothing and the vice provost does do it. And then there's the headmaster, there's the lower master, except there are two lower masters these days, one with a special responsibility for pastoral care and one with special responsibility for academic matters. Previously the headmaster was in charge of the whole school, but especially the older boys, and the lower master was in charge of the people in the first 2 years. He went for 5 years at my time. You go further back to the 80s, and there was even people could stay on longer if they're trying to get into Oxford or Cambridge. You had to stay on an extra term. You go back far enough, you had to stay on an extra year. So a long time ago, not everybody had the same foot on the same rung of the ladder at the same time. You know, when I was, you had to begin at the age of 13. Some people just turned 14. You go back, you know, to the early 20th century, people beginning at 12, finishing at 19, not doing the whole 5 years, not all beginning in September, some in January, some in April, things like that. So this is some staff accommodation, some classrooms for religious studies, or divinity as we used to call it. So you're getting an idea of the layout of the place. There's a gym here, obviously sort of indoor gymnasium games such as basketball. There's an indoor swimming pool, and there's a shooting range. So I remember this boy in my house, I shan't say his name, who was something of a wag. If you're leaving the house at certain times, you have to sign out saying where you're going and saying, I just can't handle life, so I'm off to the shooting range. So you really were firing live rounds, obviously at paper targets, not at Harrovians, I'm afraid. Assemblies didn't have hymns, but chapel did. Classic Anglican hymn, so Pen House. Remember one of the boys I knew said he thought it was Pent House, as in the pornographic magazine. Well, hope springs eternal in the human breast, as Alexander Pope would say. So one of the streets is called Common Lane, and so people were quite snobby. What would you expect? And it's the poshest school in the world. So it's difficult not to feel like that, and it's difficult not to be influenced by your milieu wherever you grow up. And I was infected with some of those nonsensical attitudes and disdain for those less fortunate than myself, despite being acutely aware that I come from a humble background. So it's two housemasters were about to take over, one was about to leave, and they both spoke with more demotic accents, and people were joking that street should be renamed Common Lane because they were common, you know, really uncommon. So I suppose I got a bit happier as I got older and accept that I am working class, and that's me, and be sort of unpretentious and not try and compete. Is it the richest public school in the UK? Good question, I don't know, probably. So yeah, when Henry VI founded it, he gave it lots of land, because farmland was really the only resource at the time. We weren't even burning much coal back then. And so it owned property here, there. There's a part of London with lots of things named after Eton. Eton Street, King's Scholar Street, Henry VI Street, and so on. It's Chalk Farm in London, just north of Regent's Park. And then there was the Eton Mission, as in various parishes associated with Eton. And in the 19th century, well into the 20th century, Eton began to sort of help out working class communities. How come you're educated in England? Because I just was sent here, that's why. So people would box the Eton Mission. I read Wilfred Thesiger's memoirs, that famous explorer. I met him once just before I left. I wish I'd obviously had more time with him, contacted him, but he died in 2004. The guy who knew Haile Selassie, who'd taken camels across Saudi Arabia's empire. It was some tribe in Kenya. So This is the private side of the head house, and there's more sort of staff accommodation for the masters to live in. And this is a war school, not as in conflict, but Edmund Warre, W-A-R-R-E, who was a headmaster in the 19th century. It's named in honour of him, and that's the history department. It's got some Latin inscription up there. I shan't bother to try to construe it. I was woeful at Latin, so everybody does Latin here, but a third of the boys did ancient Greek when I was here as well. But I was so woeful at Latin, I decided I better not. And if I had done Greek in my first year, I wouldn't be able to do history. So it's a bit of an academic disaster to begin with. Therefore, thank goodness I was allowed to do what the subject was my strong suit. So these are just some of the houses. I don't propose to show you all of the houses. So I hope I'm giving you a bit of a flavour of the place. And I've deliberately chosen a day when nobody's here, as in people won't mind that I'm filming around, because people, they cast aspersions on my character. They made these spurious allegations. I had some sort of immoral purpose for visiting a school when I went to Harrow in half term, because there were no pupils around. So you can't make my exact location. So I'm panning out now. So this street, this is Common Lane, if I've got that right, because I don't come here very much. Several years went by when I didn't come here. So I left in '98 and I came back that autumn to sort out my UCAS form. And then I didn't come back for 6 years, which I think was a healthy thing, actually. Well, some guys in the old days who would get out, get a degree and come back quick to be a beak. That was as in a teacher. So calling them masters of beaks. But that's a bit old hat saying beak. Even in my time, that slang word, they didn't use it very much. I'm not sure they used to call them beaks, as in spelt like a bird's nose. So very close to Windsor. We're just on the north side of the Thames. God, I should know this. So very close to Windsor Castle. And if I look in the background, maybe you can see, where is Windsor Castle? You can see it above my finger just here. Maybe difficult to make out Windsor Castle. So not even 2 miles from Windsor Castle. So Henry VI spent a lot of time at Windsor Castle. The other monarch who was very fond of Eton was George VI. And it's not George VI, forgive me, George III. He spent a great deal of time at Windsor Castle and walked down Eton High Street conversing with trees and handing out gold coins to Etonians. You get a bit of this if you watch The Madness of George III. No, Eton Wick Road is somewhere else, is kind of over there. What does Wick mean? W-I-C-K or which, any of those. It's the Anglo-Saxon word for an area on the shore where boats are drawn up for trading. It's fairly flat-bottom boats, so we could park at them there and then barter goods. So you get it in loads of place names like Norwich, Aldwych, Ipswich, or Wick, or anything else with Wick in it. So Eton Wick, as in closer to the Thames, where it got very shallow. Okay, so going into Weston's Yard. I don't know why it's called Weston's Yard, and nobody's told me I can't come here. No public right of way. Oh well, maybe I'll just bugger off then. And this is more of college, as in the King's Scholars House. A lot of this is 19th century, and you'll see that it's got the black diamond brick pattern. Well, I'll just walk through anyway. The worst is having to bugger off, so I might have to suddenly switch it off. Then no consequences are going to flow. And you see they've got the black patterns, the black bricks in a diamond shape every so often. You see the same thing at Hampton Court. So most of this is original, but then the extension is not. So that'll be 15th century, but then a lot will be 19th century. As the school got much bigger, that's 19th century this side here. You can probably see the difference in the architecture. So some housemasters' house on the other side. This is Weston's Yard. Look at the bit patch of grass here, and they used to keep a ram here, and the ram in August was let go because August was still part of the school time, and they would chase the ram across the fields and try and beat it to death with their clubs going into the 19th century. So we were much more frank about where our meat came from back then. So I filmed a bit on the other side, and these are masters' houses. They have lovely accommodation, but it's very, very difficult to get to be a beak at Eton. So you'd have to have been to Oxford or Cambridge, almost without exception, have a double first or a doctorate. So the trouble is they're a bit too over-educated. They're not good at teaching people who are kind of quite low ability, because they're so clever themselves. Can't really simplify it. But you have to be quite smart to get it to it. It's going to be amazing. But even this dimmest boy is actually really not that dim. And this is where the matron at college had her car. I remember some very bad boys tried to climb up there in '97 and onto that wall and get all the way onto the roof, but they got caught by security. second over. Anyway, so I wonder if this bit is public right of way. So we're out of Weston's Yard, and we're coming towards College Field. College Field as in just a sports field for some of the schoolboys, especially as close to college, as in the King's Scholars House. This is College Field. And you'll see these very small goals, they're for the field game. The full name is Football as Played Upon the Field at Eton, which was standardised in the 19th century. So it's not football as we know it. So different schools have different types of football. There's rugby football, Winchester College football, Harrow football. I won't tell you all the rules of it, but there was a goalkeeper, but he's not allowed to use his hands. It was a very small goal. And there's a bully, which was like a scrum, which is fly hacking it along. You couldn't do proper passing. You couldn't use your hands at all. You could try and score it in the goal or knock it onto a defender and over the line and touch it down and things like that. And you can get a rouge or a point and ram at rouge, but the ram has been abolished. Anyway, so that's that. I was woeful at it, mal-coordinated. So we're looking at the King of Siam's garden. So one of the kings of Siam did come here, Rama VII, who was king in the 1920s. And about 1930, when he abdicated, he came back. And he met the boy who'd fagged for him to fag, no, not being homosexual, but there's a bit of that too, but being like a servant. So partly because there's bullying, the school said, well, we're not going to abolish it, let's regulate it. But loads of schools did this. And the one thing is, you came from an upper class family, it's good for you to know what it's like to be a servant and to perform a few menial tasks, because if you lost your fortune, you might have to do it. So look at this, Perseus holding the slain Gorgon's head. And he doesn't have his shield, and there's that fleece he was trying to collect. Okay, and it's got some Greek inscription, 1913, this was put up. Look at his massive sword. Look at Medusa with, her snakes for hair. A woman who was so unutterably hideous, she could petrify a man, literally, as in turn him to stone. That's what it is in Greek. Come on, Petra. Don't you know, like Petra in Jordan? So this is the Provost's garden, and I've been into it years ago, and I can't see it. There used to be a sundial in the middle, and on it said, save time, make time, while time lasts, all times, no time, when time's past. So that's the Provost garden. Anyway, but I can't see where the sundial is. And there in the corner, the ground floor, was Martin's library, named after Sir Henry Martin. He was Martin T-E-N, the only time I've ever seen that spelling, who was provost just after the Second World War, an old Etonian and a master, been here for decades, a confirmed bachelor, as a great many of them were, and he was the Queen's private tutor. She came across from Windsor Castle to take lessons with him, and then he was knighted by King George VI right at the end of the Second World War. He died about 1948, and there's a video of it on YouTube. So he donated his library to the school. And Martin's library used to go there a lot and read, and there was some sort of board game society, the strategy society I used to go to. Here's a memorial to King Prashad Hippok. So you go on for years, well, I'm about to say years, go on for hours showing you all around. Is it gay friendly? Well, it is a bit now, everybody is a bit now, but obviously there was quite a bit of anti-gay prejudice when I was here, and that was typical for the 90s. You go back to the 70s, people seem to have carried on tolerant affairs quite openly. I think it was pornography kept people on the straight and narrow when I was here. But oddly, as society became more tolerant, Eton became more unaccepting of homosexuality. And a lot of people had dabbled in it decades ago, but then grew out of it as soon as they left. It was just situational homosexuality, because most people's sexual orientation is not engraved in stone. I don't have VIB status. Anyway, so this is the memorial here. Okay. The most generous and most serene Prince Prashad Hippok, King of Siam. Former Etonian, new flourishing garden. I don't know, he gave us to this in the year 1929. Okay, so there we are. So my Latin isn't that dreadful, and you can see this symbol there of Thailand, or Siam as we used to call it. So the Eton List office used to be around there. I was showing you the colonnade earlier, and this is the rear of the colonnade. This is one of the exits we saw. Anyway, you've got an idea of the dimensions of the place. And over there, it's difficult to see where the ground is tapering away down, that is the River Thames. And behind this wall is the headmaster's garden. So the headmaster gets huge. Sometime I might walk through and film from that direction, show you. So that's in College Field where those games are played. And then this is the wall where the wall game is played. Sometime I might tell you about that in more detail. So Slough Road is the other side of it, because Slough is that away. And then you can see the 9-arch bridge. The 9-arch bridge has got 3 arches. Sorry, we can't count. The previous one was washed away in a spate, but they rebuilt it, but the name stayed the same. So you might see white lines. I should have zoomed in, really. You don't want to see my ugly mug here, and a white line much over the other side. Oh God, am I going the wrong direction? On the wall, and that's the calx, as in chalk in Latin, calx, the scoring area. So there's a furrow, as in it is a furrow long, roughly 100 meters, if you know about furlongs from horse racing. And you would plough for that distance. That's what a furrow is, and the furrow is the pitch, and the furrow is only about 5 meters wide. So it's more or less a scrum for an hour up and down there. They do change hands halfway through. The King's Scholars, or college as we call them, playing against the Oppidans, that's everybody else. And the Oppidans is about 95% of the school, but quite often it's a draw, a highly satisfactory result. You'd think the Oppidans, having so many more people to choose from, would have a great deal more talent, but there's really more brawn than brain in that one. I did play it occasionally, not the St Andrews Day match, which is the most important match in the year. St Andrews Day, I don't know why it's a big thing here actually. So that's right at the end of November. So there was there's an exeat then, and you come back and then the sort of end of term exams in the Michaelmas term. So Michaelmas term, and there's a Lent term, which is January, February, March. Easter holidays come back April, May, June. That's the summer term. They're called halves though, because if you go back a very long time ago, they were only 2 halves to the year of roughly 5 months each, break in the summer and a break around Christmas. Because obviously travel was so slow, especially before the railways. But Eton hasn't updated its nomenclature, despite things changing. So using a lot of anachronistic terminology. So say this is all college, as in the King's Scholars House. Anyway, I was no way I was going to get a King's Scholarship. Look at the past papers. I couldn't understand the question, let alone answer it, especially in mathematics. This speaks a lot about A-level mathematics when they're 13. So that's probably enough from Eton College. I could go on all day. Some of the buildings are sort of somewhat unremarkable. We've got an idea what the place is like. It is just a school, and no, it doesn't guarantee success in later life. So as I say, about 20% would go to Oxford or Cambridge. Winchester's way more successful like that. Some will go to the top American universities because they can afford it, and they think Oxford and Cambridge are a bit prejudiced against them with this sort of off-toff idea, the office of toffs. Toffs, get off. And virtually everybody goes to university these days. It's the reason the 80s. I'll ring off now. This is Slough Road. Slough is that way. So the school's now got fraternal links with state schools to help them out. So there shouldn't be this huge gulf between the independent sector and the state sector. Unfortunately, it's getting more and more regulated, the independent sector, and the state is poking its nose in. Politicians, having ruined the state sector, determined to do the same for the independent sector. Yeah, so it was very sad reading of that book, Kidson, Portrait of an Eton Schoolmaster. And as everyone says, he wouldn't last kissing time these days. There were so many scintillating vignettes of that man who retired my first year. I was only dimly aware of who he was, a man with myriad eccentricities, who was shockingly offensive to his pupils sometimes, but really had a heart of gold. Like, for example, we conduct tutorials from the bath. We seeing him in the bath, it would be somewhat ajar to make things audible. But no one obviously raised child protection concerns these days. And I think it was inadvisable to the least what he was doing, letting the boys drink and smoke in his flat. You'd be out your ear straight away. Bad. And unfortunately, he didn't allow to be far. Memorial to Bishop Wainfleet, who was instrumental in setting up the school. I shan't bother trying to translate the whole thing. There's virtually all churches you do in this country. Turn around and see some houses, 2 more houses. So boarding houses, there's one boarding house. And here's another boarding house. Okay. And if we go a bit further forward, or are they? No, it used to be a boarding, it wasn't a boarding house in my day, but now is apparently. But right behind me, this street, that's Keats Lane, as in the headmaster, Dr. John Keat, not the poet John Keats, whose lifetime overlapped with his. But the chapel is meant to be much longer. Go down Keats Lane, about halfway down that lane, and there's a plaque on the wall saying the full length of College Chapel as intended by the founder, but they ran out of money and stopped there because it was far too big for the King's Scholars and the choristers and the masters and the few monks and priests who were involved. So if you want to go into Eton College Chapel, it's free to go in and look at the timetable. There's certain acts of public worship where anyone can attend. They could so have a look at this graveyard where the great and the good of Eton are interred. So there's so many memorials to look at there, and things saying youthful reader, blah blah blah, and who's buried just under the door, the north door of College Chapel. I feel it's the Duke of Wellington's brother. Was he provost of the college? Was a loathed it. Spent but one bitter 12-month here. But Fields of Eton, the George Orwell acid leaguing matches at the Somme and so on. The chaplain's gaff. I used to go there. Father Forrester, who was a Christian in the best sense of the word, my saviour. And so some more, another house there, Baldwin's Beck. All right, I'll switch it off now. So please follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and book tours with me, and book online lessons and all sorts of humanities subjects. Cheery, bye-bye.